Welcome and thanks for tuning in to the Victorian Aboriginal News Van Talks podcast. I'm your host, Charles Parkiner.
Victorian Aboriginal News acknowledges and pays respect to traditional owners and custodians across Australia. We acknowledge the elders who have gone before, those who currently lead their communities, and those who will follow in years and generations to come.
Since early 2022, the Yoorrook Justice Commission has been hearing and recording truths of historical and ongoing injustices experienced by First Peoples in Victoria. At the very core of its work is the establishment of an official record of the impact of colonisation, develop a shared understanding of this among all Victorians, and importantly, make recommendations for healing, system reform, and practical changes to laws, policy, and education. Playing a critical role in all of this work are the Yoorrook Truth Receivers. And I'm joined today by Wodjabullock Man and Yoorrook Truth Receiver Shane Morrill. Shane, thanks for joining me.
No worries.
And also by the Commission's Community Engagement Manager, Nick Butera. Nick, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us.
We'll start off with you, Nick. And given that the Commission's letters patent details an incredibly broad range of potential recommendations, including, as I just mentioned, laws, policies and education, just how far-reaching has the evidence to date been in terms of the issues covered and the number of people who've come forward or been asked to come forward by the Commission?
Thanks, Charles, and thanks for having us. The mandate is incredibly broad at Yoorrook. You laid out our goals quite simply at the start there, which we tried to narrow our mandate to in terms of truth, understanding and transformation. To date, we've looked into a series of themes over the last 2 or 3 years. So we've looked at things like criminal justice, child protection, land injustice, health, housing, education and more. And we've spoken to people right across the state on all of those issues. So in terms of some of the numbers that we've had more than 500 submissions come through, many of them speaking to people like Shane to get that help to make that submission. We've had over 200 witnesses come at more formal public hearings here where you'll see videos of them and commissioners there. We've had over 1,000 traditional owners speak to us and provide evidence through traditional owner roundtables. Mm-hmm. And we've had a series of elders roundtables as well where we've got guidance on what our priorities should be. So there's a really broad range. We've had lots of young people. So we were recently out at the Yoorrook Youth Justice Summit, for example, where we're hearing the voices of young people. We've been out to justice settings, to prisons, where Shane's got a lot of experience. And we've been out to all parts of the state. And we've heard everything. And I think the important thing is in terms of what we're hearing, it's on those issues. It's on systemic injustice. It's on people's stories of injustice in the state of Victoria. But it's also a lot of the times about their strengths, about their resistance, about their culture. Yeah. And people being able to celebrate that and make sure that that's on the record.
And it's important you make mention of young people because a focus of Yoorrook is talking about current injustices, not just historical injustices, but what's wrong within the systems right now. Are you finding that there's a surprisingly large amount of evidence coming forward about current injustices and system wrongdoings?
Yeah, we're definitely finding lots of current and ongoing injustice. Surprising, I'm not sure. I think most of the people we speak to aren't surprised by the injustices they continually face. One of the big things we're trying to do is point to the evidence that shows that these injustices aren't just historic, that people are still experiencing them, but they're experiencing at the state of all those different systems that I rattled off at the start. And that's one of the things that Truth and Treaty are hoping to help.
Shane, I'll pass over to you now. I saw a video of you recently up on the Yoorrook Commission's website, and you stated, and I've heard this from other truth receivers as well, that you hear from various people that their stories aren't worth sharing, yet you're at pains to assure them that every single story, every bit of evidence is important to the overall work. Just how tough has this been for you in the overall task of collecting all this evidence and convincing people that their stories, their experiences are just important as anybody else's?
Okay, I think the thing, Charles, is that a lot of our people have lived their trauma all their life. They think their story is the same as the next person's story. Once you start gaining their trust, because most people we see, you probably see 2 or 3 times before they make their submission. Once they start to realise that and you discuss their story prior to actually recording your submission, then they realise that, hey, this is different. We have got a lot to say. You're showing a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy to where their story is, that then they start to open up. Then the story begins to unfold, and then that's when they start to talk about it. But it's a lot of times I've sort of switched off the recorder, then the real story starts, because they haven't thought that it was important. But it is. It's convincing that it is.
What about the impact on the individuals themselves? Because right from the beginning of Yoorrook's existence, there was this recognition that in sharing their stories, there's going to be a reliving of the trauma. So how tough has that been for you and the people giving their evidence?
We're opening up wounds that have been sort of closed for a long time, so they're revisiting that trauma again. If it's not theirs, it's their family or parents that their story is about. So once that's opened, we do have a social emotional wellbeing team that do come with us to our submissions, and they support that as well. Then if they feel like they're running into a legal issue that they're not too sure if they should discuss, is we have our own legal team called LodgePA, which is a legal team that they can assist as well. We try to, where we can, is to get 2 or 3 people of us. We get a SUB team, myself, and maybe a legal person that go along to the submission. But it just makes them feel a lot more comfortable knowing that they're supported in those 3 areas. So,
how important have Aboriginal organisations such as Dardi Munwarro, Aboriginal gathering places, how important have they been to the overall strategy of getting out there and engaging with mobs?
Look, I think it's fantastic, because it's that extra support again. This is probably what our people have lacked over the years, is that support. Many years ago, those supports weren't there.
Yeah.
We had the odd one here and there, but now we've just got so many more that our people can go to, and locally. They don't have to travel miles for it. So.
And have they helped you in reaching the communities that you need to get that evidence from?
Yes, they do. We do get a lot of referrals as well. Like, they might have a client that they're talking to, and they say, look, your story, maybe you should tell your story to somebody from Yoorrook. We can get them through our events and functions that we arrange. People will come up to us and say, look, I've got a story to talk about. And we've also got people inquire through our website. Places that we visit and hold functions or events at, that's a lot of feedback from them.
Nick, just who can come forward? Now, we've seen many instances over the course of the past couple of years of non-Aboriginal people either requested by the Commission to give evidence, or even descendants of colonisers who've come forward. So what, if any, are the restrictions?
The restrictions are people that are going to share evidence about injustices, systemic injustices that have occurred in the state of Victoria. Our priority for a long part of the Commission has been making sure that the First People's voices were prioritised. For example, Truth Receivers like Shane and people in our team only work with First People. So their role is to support First Peoples to share those stories of injustice that have occurred in Victoria. But you're right, more recently we've expanded that to make sure that there are opportunities for other people to share their stories. We've had descendants of colonists come forward and share archival information, personal stories, family histories of injustices that their families have been part of in Victoria, the early parts of Victoria and ongoing in Victoria. And as part of Yoorrook's role as a Royal Commission, they've also called on government witnesses. So part of that is around listening to the community, listening to ACOs, listening to people with lived experience, and then calling representatives of the government, ministers, treasurers, premiers.
And so Jacinta Allen recently,
Jacinta Allen, you might remember, and asking them the questions that community have put to us, holding them to account, and then when we make recommendations, there's an opportunity to potentially call them back and ask for more accountability on whether they have or haven't been able to put through those recommendations.
Now, there's a timeline in all this. There is a cut-off date. Now, we know the Commission has a defined life expectancy, and truth receiving will actually cease in late 2024, and the Yoorrook Final Reform Report is slated to be delivered to the First People's Assembly and the Governor of Victoria in mid-2025. So what are the key priorities and pressures facing the truth receiving team in these last several months, and what is the cut-off date?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the cut-off date first. So November 22 is the last date that anyone could make a submission to Yoorrook. So November 22. So really towards the end of this year, we won't be able to accept any more submissions. If you want help from a truth receiver to tell your truth, then the middle of October is the latest you'd be able to reach out to us. And really, that's only a few months away. You asked about the sort of the pressures that are on our team. And look, our goal, the whole goal of our team, is to make sure that communities' voices are heard, communities' voices are supported and empowered through this process. And we want to make sure as many community are able to share their voice as possible. So we'd encourage people, if they do want to tell their truth, to get in as early as possible. Sort of supported well over 100 people to date. There's still 100 or so people that we're working with at the moment. So if you're keen to speak to someone like Shane or someone else and get support, or even just ask that early question, then we'd really encourage you to get in touch now. You can do it through our website. You can do it through emailing inquiries@yoorrook.org.au, or you can do it through calling our phone as well, which is 1-800-ROOK, 1-800-966-775.
All right, and we'll have that on our website as well to accompany this particular interview. One of the things that's always interested me is that there's this focus on evidence of past injustices, yet a huge part of that final formal report is providing recommendations. Would it be fair to assume then that what you're wanting also in your evidence and people who are coming forward is their own recommendations? I mean, surely there would be people out there with enormous experience in education. Professor Mark Rose, for example, who knows an enormous amount about education, who could come forward and provide recommendations as opposed to evidence itself. Nick, I'll get you to answer on that one first.
Yeah, 100%. So the questions that a truth receiver will ask you in a submission is often, what would you like to see changed?
Yeah.
What would you like to see different for your kids or your grandkids? Or questions on a particular area, whether it's health or education. And that's the same thing that the commissioners are looking for in hearing. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel with these things. There are experts all over this state. We know that people with lived experience, people who have gone through these injustices, are the ones who know best how to change it. And self-determination is at the front of that. So asking people about those changes is a key part of what we're trying to do. I guess that's a good link to the sorts of things you can make a submission about. It could be as small as a single recommendation. So someone might not want to tell their whole family history, not want to tell an injustice that is hard and painful for them, but they might want to tell a small thing about a change they'd like to see in the education system, or a way that people should be treated differently in the health system, or a way that people should be able to practice their culture on land with more freedom. It could be a single thing like that, but they could have a cup of tea with Shane, record that paragraph, and then that's their submission, and that's really powerful and going to be really helpful for the Commission going forward.
Now, Shane, another question that's really important that's often asked is the types of submissions. I know full well that there can be written submissions, verbal submissions, video submissions. What sort of submissions do you go out there and manage with the community?
I think a lot of our submissions are recorded over dictaphone, and then they're brought back and we go through it, transcribe, and then the transcribed version goes back to the participant for their approval. They might want to add some more to it and want to take something out, but the story is 100% owned by them. We can only use it the way that they want us to use it. So once they've given us the go-ahead to publish it, then it'll go onto our website.
What about geography? Because a lot of Aboriginal people to whom I've spoken say, well, I'm not a Victorian traditional owner, therefore my evidence isn't worth sharing. What's the situation when it comes to if you're a Victorian TO or you're an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person from a different area?
We're a Victorian truth-telling Royal Commission. The other states are working on theirs, and what I can gather, Queensland started on their truth-telling. South Australia may be starting on theirs. So there's going to be an opportunity for interstate people to put in their own story to their local. We can only do what's for Victoria. We've only got the power to...
But that doesn't exclude non-TOs. But your focus, therefore, is on these systemic injustices and wrongdoings that occurred within Victoria. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but that could be, well, okay, there's a Palawa person up here who's experienced incarceration, systemic wrongdoings. They can then provide evidence on that, can't they? So they don't need to be a TO.
That's right.
I have put quite a few submissions together. I'm actually working on a couple now that from interstate. That the systemic issue is from Victoria. There's a couple of people coming down from New South to Victoria that I'm catching up with the next couple of weeks, and they've got a good story to tell as well. Just finished one from Palawa lady. She's in Victoria and her issues with Victoria as well. So yes, we do that as long as the issue is from Victoria.
So a good example, you're a Palawa man, Charles, is that right? Yes. So, you've been working in the media for a long time. You can imagine many people like yourselves who are living off-country in Victoria for a long time but have experienced some sort of injustice in Victoria. So as long as it happened in Victoria, we're happy and really mandated to listen to any of those injustices that have happened on the country of Victoria.
I just want to get back once again to the challenges. We've only got really a few months from the time of recording this to the end of submissions. Again, what are the key challenges you've got, given that you want to create as comprehensive as possible this body of truth and evidence?
Look, there's a lot of challenges. Our challenge, though, is just making sure that people know that their submission counts, that their truth counts. That's our biggest challenge in our team. And that's what we focus on, getting out to as many people as we can and encouraging them that their truth is just as valuable as anyone else's. So for us, it's about making safe spaces for people. It's about raising awareness about what Yoorrook does, and it's about providing supports and spaces that people feel okay to share that truth in. As much as possible, Shane said lots of the stories that we hear are difficult. They're difficult for the person telling them, and they're also difficult for the people listening to them.
And that's something I want to get to in a minute with you, Shane.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so trying to make sure that person leaves that space feeling stronger than when they came in is really difficult. The best way that truth receivers can do that is by being led by that person themselves, by being in that person's space. So like Shane said, he'll often have many meetings with someone beforehand or many phone calls. We'll make sure the process is clear for them and they're clear on what they want to do. It can be in their lounge room, or often one of our truth receivers who lives up on Gunai country will do it by a park bench by the Mitchell River up there. And then it's making sure that person feels in control of their truth, in control of what's said in it, what's included and where it goes.
Now, it may be cathartic for some to actually share the truth, and for many people it may be the first time that they're speaking openly to someone outside their family or someone just in general about the truth. But in doing that, that's then putting it on people like you, Shane, and your fellow truth receivers, because you cannot for a second tell me and expect me to believe that you walk away from all these and think, yep, okay, I'm just going to leave that aside. How do you deal with that, and what impact has this had on you?
I'm probably fortunate that the areas that I have worked in, our prison system, which our people, it's probably their darkest part of their time. A lot of the stories that I've sat down with our people pretty bleak, yeah. So I'm sort of experienced in that, and then I worked in Koori family violence for a while as well, and that was another sad side of our people. You sort of build up a bit of a resilience to it. Always look at it as there's sympathy and there's empathy. Sympathy, if you take it home, it can break you down. Empathy is you leave it at the door when you finish work. We're truth receivers, so we've got to be good listeners. They don't want to sit there and listen to us talk. We want to hear their story. So you become a shoulder to lean on, and you've got to be strong. You can't back away from their story. You have to be there, resilient for them, so they lean on you and tell their story. It's how they get there. They build that trust to know that you're there. So as long as you're a good listener and don't take in too much as far as taking it home, you're pretty right.
Let me challenge you. How can you not take a lot of that home? Because you're doing it day after day. Let's be really blunt. This has got to wear you down at some stage. I know you're a tough 63-year-old Wodjabullock man, but I don't care who you are or where you're from. That's got to have an impact on you.
There's an old way I looked at it many years ago was that you have little boxes in your mind, and you put that in that box, and then when that's done, you close it. And you don't open that box again until that comes up again. So you store it. As a team, we debrief with each other. I debrief a lot with my family.
Yeah.
We catch up all the time, my family. So we just sit down, just have a yarn about a few things, what's going on. So you've got to release it that way. You've got to find a way that you can actually release it. And debriefing with family and friends and that no names are mentioned. There's
Of course.
confidentiality is there
Yeah.
with all of us, but it's just talking about things that have happened and knowing that a lot of our people's experiences have been experienced by all of our people. And that's why these systemic issues, there's a lot of our stories build up these systemic issues. So they're all very, not familiar, but very similar to what's happened. So,
Nick, we'll leave it with you now on this last question. So given that we're looking at ending evidence taking and truth receiving on the 22nd of November, what then happens to this team and your work up until the middle of next year when that final formal report is presented?
Yeah, that's right. So basically the end of this year, taking submissions, the final 6 months of Yoorrook next year, we'll be doing two things. We'll be going back out to the communities that we visited. So right across the state, we've been to ACOs and individuals and traditional owners. We'll be going back there to, one, acknowledge the truths and the evidence that they've shared. A lot of the work that people do reaching out for these things is often undone by not going back and acknowledging the work that they've done. So we want to go back and say thank you, acknowledge it. And we also want to go back right at the end of Yoorrook and say, and this is what we heard. So we will have a series of recommendations at the end. We'll have an official public record to put forward at the end. These are the two big things that are going to be changed. And we want to be able to have a few big forums where we can say to the community, these are the changes that commissioners have recommended go forward, and hopefully you can see your voice in those changes. So the report will include, and I think largely will be, the voices of the people who have shared their truths, whether it's by submission or hearing or roundtable, and we want to make sure that that's acknowledged, that we say thank you, and we let them know about what the future holds. So, after Yoorrook, there's an opportunity for the government to take up those recommendations. There's also an opportunity, like you've mentioned before, for the First Peoples Assembly, for the treaty process to use those recommendations in their treaty negotiations going forward. So it'll be about explaining those next steps.
Shane, I know you want to throw in one last word and one last message, so over to you.
I'd just like for all of our people out there that this story is important. This is the first truth-telling Royal Commission in Australia's history, and it's a good chance to be part of history.
Shane, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you, Charles.
And Nick, thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
For a full transcript of this interview, visit the Victorian Aboriginal News website at vicaboriginalnews.com.au. Until our next episode, stay safe and stay informed.